Hello, can everybody hear me okay? Hello and welcome to Board and Commission orientation. We're still waiting on a couple of people, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. I am Erin Flores. I'm City Secretary and Deputy Director of Administrative Services. And first of all, we just wanna say thank you very much for being willing to serve your city and for helping us to make the city what it is. It's a very important job, and we really appreciate people that take the time out of their day to serve on our boards. It's means more than you will ever know. So is there any of the new appointees that did not get a folder? Does everybody have one? Okay, so if you'll open your folder, you'll see on the right-hand side, you should have an oath of office. If you'll pull that paper out, okay, so there's going to be two forms. One is an oath of office and one is a statement of officer. So here in just a moment, we're going to all swear in at the same time. And then I'll have you guys sign that and sign the statement of officer. So you should find a pen in your folder as well. So if you will all stand for me. Reappointees, you do not have to do this part. And if you'll raise your right hand, and I will ask you to repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of State Your Board of the State of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. Okay, you may be seated, and if you will sign your oath and then also sign your statement of officer, and I will come around and gather those forms from you guys. Okay, and now our city attorney, Victor Flores, is going to come up and get started on your training.
Woo! Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. We all need a little encouragement this evening. Everybody doing okay? Yeah, right. Well, first of all, we want to thank you guys for your willingness to volunteer and serve the city. We know this is all just volunteer work, giving up your time from your jobs at times, from your family, for sure. And so these boards and commissions that you're about to serve on or continue to serve on. They're really important to the functionality of the city. It's really a major component on how the city receives feedback from the community and sharing that with staff and council. And so I'm going to go over, I'm really going to try to be brief, and my format is one of just being a casual conversation. If this goes correctly, I'll run through this pretty quickly, and then hopefully we can have some spirited, engaging back and forth of any kind of questions you might have. This is because our office doesn't necessarily serve as legal counsel for your boards and commissions, just because we can't be at all the places at once. This is your opportunity to kind of ask me any kind of questions you might have, specifically as it may apply to the Texas Open Meetings Act, Public Information Act, conflicts of interest, rules of decorum as you have your meetings, and just any other kind of questions that you might have for me. So let's get this started. There you go. The first thing I want to touch on is Texas Open Meetings Act. Anybody, let's say, not familiar with the Texas Open Meeting Act, this is your first, okay, one. Anybody else? Everybody kind of, okay, who's served on the Board of Commission already? Okay. And then others, you just may already be aware of the Open Meetings Act as maybe applied to other organizations you served on with governmental entities. The Texas Open Meetings Act attempts to create and ensure that there's public transparency and public participation in all government meetings. And so what that allows is for residents, participants to come in and listen. And if items held for a public hearing item, to actually engage in that discussion. So what's the definition of meeting? And so the Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, it lists out what a meeting is, and for purposes of our boards and commissions, it's going to be a discussion or deliberation between a quorum, which is the majority of members, or between a quorum and another person regarding public business or policy, which the council or the board of commission controls or supervises, or during which formal action is taken. Any attorneys in the room other than Andy? So that's a lot of legalese. What does that mean? Well, how does that apply? Well, I think you start off with the fact that it's the number of members in one space, right? So if you have a 7-member board, 4 is going to be the quorum. You get together and you talk about city business, about your board or commission business. That's going to be a meeting. And so in those cases, you would have to properly post for the meeting and notify the public, hey, we're going to have this meeting, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. An issue that comes up under walking quorums, there's, without getting into the weeds of it, because you really could kind of spend a whole 15-20 minutes on what is a walking quorum. The legislature and several courts have set up parameters around, let's call them bad actors. Anybody played the telephone game growing up or familiar with the telephone game? So some bad actors in the past have tried to circumvent the Texas Open Meetings Act and played the telephone game. And so to avoid collectively coming together as a group of 4 and triggering quorum and the Texas Open Meetings Act, they've tried to just call each other on the phone and discuss a certain item. Well, the Texas courts and the legislature has codified that would still be a quorum. And so if you attempt to do that to circumvent the Texas Open Meetings Act, there's some criminal penalties in doing so. But that's not going to be an issue with Farmers Branch. I'm just here to advise that exists. So if you're going to have a meeting under the Texas Open Meetings Act, one of the requirements is in the transparency efforts is that you need to post currently until September 1st, you need to post the meeting and the items to be discussed 72 hours before the meeting. This session, they've actually changed the language to say you have to give 3 business days notice. So without doing the math, It's just I'll just say 3 block days. So for those, like for attorneys, if we have certain days that we have to file something with the court, it's just that many days and the midnight before that deadline, okay? Probably not explaining it very well, but if you just think of it as 3 block days, so if the meeting was to be held, like today's meeting, today's Thursday, you would have to have all day Wednesday, all day Tuesday, and all day Monday. Under the new, on September 1st, you have to have that amount of notice, which means that you have to really post it by 11:59 or midnight Friday. Or I think in that case, Sunday, because you would still have those 3 full business days of notice. A lot of city secretaries' offices are calling our office to get guidance on that, but that's the latest and greatest for publication of notice. Executive sessions as authorized by law. A lot of your boards and commissions will not touch on this, but if you're planning and zoning, or if you're the zoning board of adjustments, that does occur from time to time. So normally you have to have all your discussions about a certain agenda item in public to give the citizens an opportunity to hear what's going on. But for confidentiality and other legal purposes, the state law does allow for the attorney representing that entity to go behind closed doors and have confidential communications to provide appropriate legal advice and counsel about those items. Now, once that legal advice is provided, they still have to come out and participate in the public portion of that agenda item. So a lot of those deal with legal advice, 551071, economic development, personnel matters as well, but real estate transactions can be discussed in executive session. But they're very limited, right? So if you do see your agenda item, if you see your agenda before a meeting and you're reviewing it, and you have a legal question about any of those items, please contact your staff liaison or your council liaison, city secretary's office, and express that you may have a legal question about that. And then they'll contact our office and we can help vet out whether we need to send an attorney out for that item. And then we'll post the appropriate language for executive session. No action can ever be taken in closed session. It's just to give that legal advice. What you'll see typically is when you come out, they'll reconvene the public portion of the meeting, and they'll give some reference to authorizing the city manager or the city the director to take action as discussed in executive session. And then there may be discussion out in the public about whether they want to do that or not, but that's where they make the action, is out in the public. Also, one thing I really wanted to touch on is if you're ever in executive session, that is attorney-client privilege. And that attorney-client privilege belongs to the collective. It belongs to the governing body, it belongs to PNZ, it belongs to the BOA, city council, whatever that entity is that's received that legal counsel, that belongs to them. And so if you're a member in that collective and you share that information with your spouse, with a friend, with a community member, you are breaking that confidentiality privilege. And so what you've done is you've diluted that, you've broken that confidentiality, and that that exposes everything you talked about. You can actually get in trouble criminally if that's found out to be intentional. I won't go into that, but I just want you to be aware of that. If you're provided information in executive session, that what's the adage? What stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in executive stays in executive. The other important statute that you should be made aware of is, now that you're a part of city business, you're a city board or commission. It used to be if you received that, if you had a city issued laptop, iPad, phone, and you were communicating about city business, obviously that would be subject to public disclosure, barring some kind of, attorney-client privilege or something. But you would have to release that to anybody in Farmers Branch or anywhere in Texas, or anybody that wanted to request that information. You would have to give that over. Well, a few years ago, because some people were asserting, hey, this is my personal cell phone, and you have no right to what's on my personal cell phone. Well, the courts and later the legislature codified that so long as it's city-related business and it's being communicated in that manner, even if it's on your personal device, you still have to disclose that. So again, just be aware if you're talking about city business, talk about it as if it would be on the front page of somebody's newspaper someday. Not that it would, but it could. So better safe than sorry. Again, I don't want to scare everybody and be like, hey, you can't talk about public business on your phones or whatnot, but just know that just use good common sense. You represent the city in these matters, and there are certain exceptions to those requests for disclosure. Our city will assert them as applicable, but just use kind of like that common sense, good values, good judgment when you're communicating about city business. The next thing I wanted to cover is conflicts of interest. Two big statutes, really, local government codes 171 and 176. One of these applies to really like procurement or acquisition of materials or contracts that you might be involved with in approving for your board. And I think a lot of these boards and commissions are advisory, but nonetheless, just want to cover them just so you're made aware of it. So under 171, this is a conflict provision that prohibits voting or I really want to read through this because everything's really important here. Prohibits voting on or participating in a matter involving a business entity or real property in which the official has a substantial interest, and we're going to cover substantial interest down here, but has a substantial interest in an action on the matter, if an action on the matter will result in a special economic effect on the business that is distinguishable from the effect on the public. I'm going to unpack this in a little bit, but bear with me. Or in the case of a substantial interest in real property, it is reasonably foreseeable that the action will have a special effect, economic effect, on the value of property distinguishable from its effect on the public. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. What's a substantial interest? So the statute actually provides substantial interest is if the official owns 10% or more of the voting stock or shares of the business entity, owns either 10% or more or 15,000 or more of the fair market value of the business entity, or receives funds from the business entity that exceeds 10% of the person's gross income for the preceding year. There's a lot of fact finding in this. So my first recommendation is, again, good judgment, good values, common sense. You start having that kind of, I don't know, maybe I might have a conflict. My recommendation is, at no cost to you, you can call city secretary's office or you can call your board liaison, and they will contact us, and we will help you vet whether that is a conflict and whether you should abstain from those items. Just because, as you can see from the statute alone, just what a substantial interest is, it comes down to the details of the item and what you're voting on, right? Because in addition to the substantial interest portion of vetting this out, you may have a substantial interest, but then the second kind of prong to this to consider is it distinguishable from the effect on the public, right? So the general public. So if you have a substantial interest, but this whole item that you're considering is going to impact everybody within the city the same way, In those cases, in certain cases, you would be allowed to vote on those things. Again, very fact specific. And again, if you have that red flag that goes up, that good judgment, that kind of like, well, I'm not quite sure, an abundance of caution, just contact us. We're here to help you out. Under 176, this one requires local government officers to disclose employment, businesses, family relationships with vendors who conduct business or consider conducting business with local governmental entities. This is more of that procurement, purchasing, and approving of contracts, which I don't really think many of the boards and commissions that you represent today deal with those. That's more for city council, but did want to cover that for sure. Conflicts of interest, anybody from planning and zoning? Okay, great. So there's a statutory, conflict disclosure that says if you're within 200 feet of the notice area for zoning cases, you would have to provide that information to us and just abstain from consideration on that item. And also there's the appearance of impropriety. Unlike city council, many of your boards, again, this comes from the standpoint that you are a representative of the city. You represent the city in some form or fashion in your engagement with your boards and commission. And so you really want to be cognizant of maybe by statute or by ordinance or by the charter, you might not have a hard conflict. But then again, maybe you say, I have that gut feeling, I have that red flag, this is just not going to be perceived well because I know person X, Y, and Z, and it may be perceived that they may have influence on me and my judgment. Our recommendation is, call us up, and we're going to say, well, if you feel that strongly about it, yeah, sure, abstain. We support that. If there's other personal reasons, as we unpack those factual situations with you, we're probably going to recommend that you do vote on items that you can vote on. We don't ever want. Let me take a couple steps back and say it this way. Some of your boards and commissions will be asked to make some really important, difficult decisions that might not be favorable to a certain sector of a residents and farmers branch. Just because it's a hard decision doesn't mean you should avoid it. You've been asked by your council members to make those hard decisions and give your input, whether it's in favor or against an item. And so what I would recommend is, if there's an appearance of impropriety, yes, sure, we want to protect the credibility and the transparency for all city commission and board items. But if it's just down to the personal reason that you don't want to get involved in some hot topic, we're going to recommend that you take a position on it. Right? At the end of the day, it's your decision, but legally, we would recommend that you take a position on it. And I just realized I had this on twice. Apologize. Rules of decorum. Has anybody served as chair before? Chair? Oh, bless your heart. It's a tough role. As the chair of a board, and if you haven't served as a chair of a board, everybody here, by way of volunteering and applying for these positions, you're a leader, right? If you weren't a leader in your community, you just would not be giving up your free time to sit here tonight. And so the goal, I think, for most is that if called upon, you would serve as chair. And so even though you haven't served as chair, or maybe you don't necessarily have the inclination to serve as chair right now, just bear with me on this slide, because you may be called to serve as chair if the chair is absent or the vice chair is absent, and then everybody's looking around and saying well, the chair and vice chair are out, and so we need to pick somebody, and it might just be you. Rules of decorum. As a chair, you govern how the meetings are conducted. And for 95% of your agenda items, you're not going to have a lot of contentious discussion about your items. But for the chance that there is, and there may be, especially with your more involved boards like Planning and Zoning, Board of Adjustments, the chair will be called upon from time to time to really regulate the discussion. Now, especially when it comes to public hearing items, items where the public has a platform to express their personal opinions about an item. They have a First Amendment right to express their feelings. The First Amendment right does not allow for the disruption of a meeting. Where that line is depends on the type of discussion and what's being said. So these guidelines, these examples, are guideposts that if they fall within these kind of examples, feel comfortable and confident to say, sir, ma'am, you're out of order. I'm going to give you a warning. Please close up and tie your comments to the agenda item, or refrain from this type of activity. So speech or conduct may be prohibited when it actually hinders, obstructs, interferes with, impedes, or otherwise substantially disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting. And I'll say it again, a person's First Amendment rights does not allow them to disrupt a meeting. Okay? So some of the examples of this activity that might be disruptive or disorderly conduct: engaging in personal attacks or insults that are not relevant to policy issues or other official business within the city's jurisdiction or authority. We see that play out a lot with city council. I would adapt this to your commission or your board. If they start going off about, first of all, a topic that's not on the agenda is not to be discussed in a dialogue with the board. And also, it's just, you can point out and note to the person speaking, saying, we appreciate your comments, but we don't have the authority to govern what you're saying. Maybe that's with a state agency or a federal agency or some other local entity. That's not our board or commission. You can prohibit booing or hissing, foot stomping, amplified music, not music, but just amplified sound, other than city provided microphones. There's enough YouTube. If you go on YouTube and you just Google Open Meetings Act auditors, you can see some pretty creative individuals that come in and they'll use their platform to conduct raps and performances in front of the council with their boombox. It's somewhat entertaining for everybody watching, but really difficult for the council trying to conduct their meeting. So if that occurs, you can absolutely require that the person refrain from that. Playing music, videos, or other recordings. Comments tending to incite outbursts, immediate threats, immediate violence, or illegal conduct. Let me share this with you. This is very important. If at any time, most of the boards, if not all the boards, will have a staff liaison. Please notify staff if you're at any point, any of the board members are feeling that they have been threatened, or there's some kind of physical disruption, act that's about to take place. Your health and your safety is our utmost of utmost importance. And so if we need to call a police officer to come in and regulate that, just please let us know, right? That is not acceptable. That kind of conduct is not acceptable. Creating or participating in physical disturbance, speaking while not recognized by the presiding officer, or speaking loudly beyond the allotted time. So this is a quick tip: is as a chair, you have somebody can come up to the microphone and present their case. But if somebody else is presenting their case and somebody starts talking from the chairs, you have absolutely right to tell that individual, sir or ma'am, Mr. Flores is speaking and has the floor. you can come up next, but for right now, you just need to keep your comments until it's your turn. Completely within the realms to do that. And then just preventing others from speaking or observing the meeting. Again, this is just a very high overview of just things that you'll experience while serving on these boards. Again, as attorneys, we're always like the doomsday speech people. Hopefully hopefully you have an absolute great time on your boards or commissions. Hopefully I've been able to provide just some guideposts for you to have a better experience if some of these situations come up. But with that, I might have a few more minutes. Any questions? Anybody? Yes, sir.
I assume that every board has a city employee who's directly affected by the board's decisions. How does that work? Or maybe directly.
Let me see if so I think the question is, do the boards and commissions decision impact the employees? Is that the question?
Yeah, the person who's in charge of the function that you're.
Like the liaison. Okay. That liaison is there to help serve and facilitate the meeting for your board and commission. So the actual decisions you make, I wouldn't say impact the employee. They're there to serve you, to serve you and your board. The board's decisions, they as advisory boards, unless you're on ZBOA, those just go straight up to the city council. And so that's, your boards and commissions are to provide information to city council, not necessarily to make any determinative decisions on a certain employee. Does that answer your question?
Not on an employee, but just in the monthly meeting, maybe a decision was made that something needs to be changed. And how does that work?
Yeah, so your boards and commissions are advisory. I think the only one that's not advisory is Zoning Board of Adjustments, because they're the only board that a decision can be appealed to district court. Even planning and zoning gives a recommendation based on the zoning use case, and that recommendation is then submitted to city council for approval. Other boards and commissions may provide those advisory recommendations to city council. Some of them may be provided to city council, to the city management office. In either case, either the city manager or the city council are the entity that makes the determination. And so to answer your question more specifically, I don't think your boards and commissions are ever going to be in the position that they've made a decision that would impact the city employee. It would be a recommendation. Right. Good question though. Anybody else? Andy's looking at me like he has a question.
I only want to know where you've been the past 2 years.
The good news is I'm back up in North Texas. Everybody, I appreciate your time, and I just wish you a great year on your boards and commissions. This is our information. I'm Victor Flores. Nicole Kaur, she's another partner at the firm, and so is Whit Wyatt. These are our email addresses. Feel free to contact us, but I think your better and most quickest response is going to come from your staff liaison, and we'll continue to help them as well with any kind of questions you might have. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you, Victor. So that is all the legal stuff. Now we're going to be talking about harassment. This is a requirement. So you did get an email that directed you to take a certification online regarding workplace harassment. If you haven't done that, just make sure you get that done pretty timely. Our Human Resources Director, Jeffrey Ross, he's going to come up and he's going to give this presentation.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Name is Jeffrey Ross, Director of Human Resources for the City of Farmers Branch. And so we're going to go through some information here tonight on sexual harassment and also hostile work environments. So some of this information may be uncomfortable, it may sound a little bit unsettling. It's important that we go through it though so that you know what to watch for, what to recognize, and you know what your options are if something were to occur. All right, so first, one of the questions I always like to answer is like, why do we do this training? Why do we talk about it? Because as we're coming and going, as we're doing different things in the workplace, and as you're doing different things here for the city, you're going to be engaging with a lot of different people and things that are related to the work that we do here at the city. And so each year, just last year, in 2024, there were 88,531 charges of discrimination, harassment, things of that nature, filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and that represented about a 25% increase from the year before. Now, take that number and couple it with a couple of other numbers, wherein 85% of people who experience harassment or discrimination never file a formal charge with either the state or the EEOC, and that 70% of those people never ever report it, even internally, like even to their own HR departments or to their own supervisors. So taking all that information together, the reason that we talk about this is because you may not hear about it very often, but it happens way more often than you might think, and that's why it's important to be educated on it. Most of the stuff that we're going to go over today is not going to be mind-blowing. It's not going to be something that, oh wow, you know, I never knew that before. This is all very, very common sense stuff, and you know, everybody here, I'm sure, already acts in a very appropriate way at all times, but it's important that we go through the information as you represent the city. So, we'll start by defining sexual harassment, and that's unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature, or harassment based on a person's sex. So unwelcome means the behavior is unwanted, not solicited, or unasked for. And there's really two primary types that we're going to cover. The first is going to be quid pro quo, and the second will be hostile work environment. So we're going to start with quid pro quo harassment. And so quid pro quo is Latin for this, for that, and occurs really when any aspect of business or a position is made conditional with the expectation of receiving an inappropriate favor in return, whether it's explicitly sexual or not. We'll go over a couple of examples of that in just a moment. And this does include use of your own position to gain something from someone else. And so at no time may any aspect of business or position be made conditional upon any type of inappropriate trade or this for that. And these would include things such as explicit sexual contact, phone numbers or friend requests on social media, sexually explicit photos, non-sexual contact, maybe something like a shoulder rub or something like that. Like, hey, if you vote this way on the thing that I'm trying to get done, you know, I'll give you a great shoulder rub or something like that, right? That's a this for that kind of exchange. And then dates, whether in person or virtual. Obviously, these could go on and on and on, but we're just kind of trying to hit the highlights of things right now to give you an idea of what that looks like. So quid pro quo is really always going to involve a trade of something. It's going to be saying, if you do this, then I'll do that. Or if I do this for you, then you'll do this for me, right? So it's always going to involve some type of trade. So it can be kind of readily identifiable in that way. What can be less identifiable is a hostile work environment, because it's much, much more subjective and based on the person's perception of what's happening and the intent of the person delivering it. So we're going to talk a little bit about hostile work environment, and so it's unwanted or unwelcome sexualized speech, conduct, imagery, or any other behavior that is extreme or pervasive enough to create an uncomfortable, abusive, or hostile environment. These behaviors can be verbal, nonverbal, virtual, physical, or any combination of explicit or non-explicit behaviors. And as we start talking about some of these, it's important to frame it in a bigger context of it's not just about sexual harassment, it's about any type of harassment in general and any type of discrimination in general, right? Whether it's sexual or not. And you know, the big difference between it and quid pro quo Quid pro quo typically has a well-defined trade for some type of favor, whereas in hostile work environment is much less defined and much more personal with varying levels of subtlety, perception, and intent. And so we'll go through a couple behaviors here in a moment, but I do want to make a quick note about consent, because consent is very important as we start talking about some of these behaviors. So consent must always be expressly given and clearly and freely communicated. So if someone agrees to an activity or they agree to do something under the pressure of intimidation, coercion, or threat, that is not consent. Lack of resistance, their silence, laughing, or not expressly telling you to stop the behavior is also not consent. And your perception or assumption of consent is not consent. So as we go through some of these examples, we'll talk a little bit about that. So let's talk about some of the types of behaviors that we want you to be able to recognize and maybe get some thoughts around with hostile work environment. So the first type is probably going to be one of the most obvious, which will be non-consensual physical contact. This is going to be touching, grabbing, or groping anybody on any part of their body, brushing up against someone to make intentional physical contact, shoulder massages, hugging, and this is where I always kind of take a pause and say, hugging is very, very common among, especially people who interact with each other a lot. And, if consent exists, that's great. But if you don't really know that person or you don't have that relationship with that person, you're not sure consent exists, maybe a hug feels right, maybe it doesn't. If you know that you don't have consent with that person to say, well, let me give this person a hug, default to, I probably shouldn't give this person a hug. And so making someone else touch you in a sexual or physical manner, or actual or attempted sexual assault. Now, nonverbal behaviors. These are things that could be things like when maybe somebody's just walking by and they catch your attention and you're licking your lips, you're blowing them kisses, or making other sexually suggestive motions or gestures. It could be things like winking at them, raising your eyebrows. Something that is interesting that comes up somewhat often is taking pictures of others without their consent. So we do get complaints of this in human resources, and I've worked some cases like this where people are being, we've got somebody who's coming by, maybe they're standing at the printer, somebody's taking a picture of them from behind, something like that, right? They don't have their consent to be able to take that picture. The person finds out they've taken that picture, things like that, right? So if we're going to take pictures, make sure that you have somebody's consent to do so. Staring inappropriately or just too long when someone walks by you, maybe you're giving them what they call the elevator eyes. Your eyes are going up and down and looking at everywhere they probably shouldn't be, right? So, or leaving gifts in their personal area. And this one, I always give the example of a case that I worked one time, a complaint that we had. We had a group of men who worked together, and one of them was a bit more effeminate than others. And so one day, after a lot of teasing and things like that, they left a box of tampons in his work area. He reported it, we investigated, we uncovered a lot of other information. It led to 2 terminations and 4 suspensions. So, because there was a lot of other information that just came out of that one thing, right? So sometimes the things that maybe we think might be innocent or they might be funny, right? It's not the place for it in the workplace. Virtual harassment. We live in a very virtual world these days. And so these are things that occur virtually. These are text messages, emails, it maybe happens over social media or other virtual settings. Sending or asking for sexually explicit or inappropriate photos, sexual contact, or other inappropriate behavior. And as you heard Victor talk about earlier, if you're doing that, with your cell phone, based on what you're doing, it could be subject to the Texas Open Records. Cyber stalking or creating fake social media accounts to gain access to someone's social media or other internet presence. And on social media, if you're tagging others on social media without their consent. And some of this may seem, why are we talking about this? I don't talk about things that these are things that we get complaints on that we actually have to go and investigate. So we had one issue where we had one employee that was tagging another employee on their social media and saying, this is my work wife, and making comments about things like that. That woman was married, and the husband didn't appreciate the comments, the tagging, things like that, right? So again, it comes back to consent. If you don't have consent to do that with somebody, then don't do that, and think about the consequences of those actions. Or coercing someone with previously received content, right? Like this is something that's more commonly known now as revenge porn, you know, where maybe one relationship existed at one point or another, and consent even existed at one point or another for different things. And then that relationship sours and they try and use that previously received content where they had consent to get it at the time, you know, they try and use it to get something out of that person now, right? So, and then finally, verbal behaviors. And these are probably the most common ones that we have to investigate that people experience. And so it's things that people say, right? So it's going to be sexual innuendos that are suggestive or in reference to sexual behavior, repeated or excessive stopping by. And when I say repeated or excessive stopping by, this is lingering a little bit too long and too often with one person or another, right? We had an example would be we had a front desk person, a receptionist, and we had a maintenance person who would come in only to this office and only check. They would come in every day and say they're checking the lighting around to make sure everything still looks good, and they're stopping too long at this person's desk, and they're only ever talking to this person, and of course it escalates and the person becomes uncomfortable and we have to step in, right? So repeated requests for dates or even physical contact, sexually suggestive jokes or comments about another person, or sharing details about your sexual personal life, or asking for details about others. And we're going to dive just a little bit deeper into verbal behaviors and some of the most common ones that really spark probably the majority, maybe 90% of most of all the complaints and all the things that we have to investigate. That's going to be inappropriate jokes or comments. And a lot of these may not even be sexual in nature, right? They're just going to be inappropriate for what we're doing. And so that's going to include any jokes, comments, or observations about someone's personal appearance, orientation, lifestyle, or anything personal or specific to that person. And no matter your intent of what you were joking about or the comment you were trying to make, no matter your intent, it's how the person receives it. And I want you to remember that just because they laugh, maybe tell a joke and maybe they're feeling a little uncomfortable, they laugh anyways. Just because they laugh does not mean that you had consent to tell that joke to that person. And so comments or observations should never be about other people or include anything that would be specific to a person or group of people. And when we're talking about these inappropriate jokes or comments, you know, that's really where you dive down to it, is that we never make them about people or specific situations with people. I'm the kind of person in the workplace, I tell a lot of jokes, but they're always about situations or other things. Like a man walks into a bar, what does he say? Ouch, right? Like that's a joke, and that's a really good joke. But we never make them about people. Jokes should never be made about people, especially their personal attributes, their personal characteristics, their lifestyles, things like that. Things including, you know, their race or their sex, their weight, their disability, age, generation, their intelligence, their choice of clothing even, right? So if it's within the dress code. And so let's talk a little bit about what to do if you experience sexual harassment or if you see it happen. So the first and best thing that you can do, if you feel comfortable to do so, is tell the harasser to stop the behavior. You could say something like, saying or doing XYZ is inappropriate and I want you to stop. It makes me uncomfortable when you talk like that. Please stop. Please stop touching me. I don't like it. You're making a joke, but it's offensive. Please stop, right? And we fully understand that not everybody is going to take that step to say, hey, stop doing that, right? Because that's a hard thing to do, especially when somebody is right in your face doing it, right? And that's okay if you can't. You have a resource here at the city, and we're going to request that you report any of this kind of behavior. If you do experience it, report it to the city secretary. She's going to know what to do next. So make sure that you're telling the city secretary. And then after that happens, make sure that you, after you do report it, be observant and mindful of any retaliation or disparate treatment you receive as a result of reporting the behavior. And be sure to document and report any concerning behavior experience after your initial report. And by Texas law, you have 300 days to report the incident. The sooner the better. Now, if you report after that 300 days, we're still going to investigate, we're still going to do about it. It just means that some of the things that might happen under the law, you may no longer have the right to anymore, such as a civil case, things like that. Okay, so talk a little bit about the consequences of sexual harassment. And so in your Code of Ethics Handbook, your Farmers Branch Code of Ethics Handbook, under section that's listed here, discrimination and harassment, it covers discrimination and harassment in your Code of Ethics Handbook. And so some of the things that could happen if we're violating some of these sorts of things, you could be dismissed from your position on your board. You could be facing civil lawsuit liabilities even, or based on the severity, jail time or criminal charges, especially if it's a type of harassment that turns physical. Okay, and so what we always say about this sort of thing is that prevention is better than reaction, because we can all be part of the prevention of it. So the best thing that we can do is we can be aware of our own behavior. And so it's as simple as asking ourselves some simple questions. Do I make comments to other people about their bodies, appearances, relationships, or lifestyles? Do I make jokes that I think are funny, but I'm the only one who laughs? Am I talking about my personal or my love life at work? Do I ever touch people, whether or not I think it is innocent? Has anyone ever asked me to stop saying something or doing something because they were offended or felt uncomfortable? Do I flirt with or jokingly tease other people? And is what I'm saying appropriate for a workplace, and could it be perceived as offensive? And then second to that, being aware of your own behavior, being part of that preventive effort, is to report harassment when it happens. And again, you can report that behavior to the city secretary. It's Erin, she's sitting right over here. She's great. So make sure that you report that behavior if you do experience it or if you witness it. And with that, do we have any questions? Sir?
Well, it sounds like from this presentation, we are actually employees of the city.
No, so you're a representative of the city. You're representing the city on your board and commission, and that's why we give this training. You're not considered employees of the city. But you are considered an agent of the city or representative of the city.
Need to be aware of this sort of behavior, encounter it, what to do about it.
Absolutely. That's the whole reason that we do it, because you may experience it, you may not experience it, but just in case, it's one of those just in case things. We want everybody to be informed and aware and what to do if it does happen. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And that, the code of ethics he's referring to, that can be found on our website. If you'd like a hard copy, we could give it to you, but you can just Google City of Farmers Branch Code of Ethics and it'll take you right to it. Okay, so if we have no further questions, then we're at the end. We do have our board liaisons here that can assist you if you have any questions. I'm just going to introduce them, that way you know who you're looking for. So we have Hillary Kidd, Historical Preservation Restoration Board. We have Bonnie Newman, Art and Culture. Sarah Bergman in the back, Planning and Zoning. With Jackie Biles over here, Senior Advisory Board. We have Barry Boyd, he assists with ZBA, am I correct? Okay, Zoning Board of Adjustment. Is there anybody else back there that I can't see? Sarah? Is there anyone else back there that I can't see? And then we have Samantha McKinney, Municipal Drainage. Okay. For library, is Jessica back there? Right here. Jessica Alvarado can help you right there. Okay, all right, you guys, thank you so very much. Please grab a cookie on your way out, and we thank you for joining us.